Hello and welcome to Jerusalem, to your private video tour. My name is Joel Simhoni, and I'm going to be your private guide through the Via Dolorosa, the Road of Agony, the 14 stations of the Way of the Cross with Jerusalem.com. During the Second Temple period time, the Jewish people from all the provinces of Rome gathered in Jerusalem 3 times a year for the 3 main holidays, the 3 main pilgrimages time. One of them is the Passover. One of these gentlemen who arrived to Jerusalem at that time was a young Galilean leader named Jesus of Nazareth, who was followed by a large group of people. Jesus arrived to Jerusalem to demand social justice and freedom of worship. His demands created turbulence, and the leadership of the time did not like it. They brought him to the Sanhedrin for a hearing, and they found him to be undesirable. From the gathering of the Sanhedrin, Jesus was brought here to the Antonia, to the grand offices of the governor, Pontius Pilatus. Pontius did not want anything to do with it. He claimed it was a Jewish problem. But the pressure of the leaders was tough. To try to avoid any friction, Pontius Pilatus turns to the elders and says, "Is this the man you fear?" And they have replied, "But governor, he is preaching for the kingdom of heaven, and that is treason." Pontius Pilate had no other choice but to condemn Jesus and send him straight out to the dungeons of the Antonia. In the dungeons he will spend a time, and within days he will be eventually taken out to the Praetorium, down outside the Antonia, where he'll begin the Via Dolorosa, the Passion of the Christ. We are situated in the beautiful courtyard, together with adjoining different structures. Actually, we are in the center of the Antonia fortress, in their Praetorium, where the daily life of the fortress are carried out by the legionnaires. But up in the offices is situated the governor Pontius Pilatus, who just condemned the young men from the Galilee for swift punishment. A rumor floats around that he has mentioned that he is the king of the Jews. The doors will open. The young men will come out into the courtyard, and the legionnaires will stop their daily activity. They will put a crown of thorns into his head. The crown will pierce his skin and blood will drop. The legionnaires will throw all their frustrations of their daily life upon him, as the whip will swish, and again and again. Silence. The eyes are peeled, as the shackles will be free, and that young man, hurt, degraded, punished, will be taken back through those doors, back to Pontius Pilate's offices.
The first question everybody asks is, really it was here? Really we don't know exactly where the Praetorium. There are different opinions among the scholars. Christian tradition maintains that this place was the fortress Antonia. So the fortress Antonia, we know, was in the northern side of the Temple Mount, and it was exactly here where we are now. Also in other places we do not have other churches which maintains the same memory. So this is the only one. And this is very beloved by Christian pilgrims. Almost all of them come here before doing their Via Dolorosa.
Here in this beautiful courtyard, you can find 2 important sites. Behind me, the Church of Flagellation, built by Antonio Berlucci. The unique interior marks the pain and suffering, images relating to the site, to the deed, to the pain. And to the right, the Chapel of Condemnation. Station number 2 is situated within the compound of the monastery of the flagellation controlled by the Franciscan brothers in Jerusalem. On the traditional path of the Via Dolorosa, the 14 stations of the Way of the Cross, one passes beneath an arch, traditionally marked as the Ecce Homo arch, the site when Pontius Pilate will try to give Jesus his freedom to the vote of the people. Two men will be brought from the dungeons to face the nation. One, a Galilean leader, and the other, a thief named Barabbas, some say a freedom fighter. Pontius will escort him to the gates beneath the arch and will raise to the people and say, Ecce Homo, who is the man? Barabbas or Jesus of Nazareth? But the crowd, influenced by the elders, will vote for Barabbas. And that moment of hope, of freedom, will be dashed. And Jesus will return to the dungeons, awaiting his destiny. We are situated here on the actual site of the Ecce Homo Arch, in the Sisters of Zion, on the path of agony, the Via Dolorosa, the Passion of Christ.
The arch that we still see on the Via Dolorosa was there at that time, and it was believed because of the scriptures that that was the arch under which Pilate would have condemned Jesus when he said, Ecce Homo, or behold the man. And the architecture was such that there was a small arch on either side. Unfortunately, the one on the other side no longer exists. Later, after the building had already been completed, it was discovered that we had this big pavement underneath as well as cisterns. And so it became clearer that the stones that were part of the pavement had been part of the Antonia Fortress, which is next to us. So for the Christian tradition, this is the place where Jesus was condemned to death, and it's part of the beginning of the Via Dolorosa. And so we find that we have a very precious place to remember this sacred event, and it brings people from all over the world together to commemorate, to pray and to remember.
The chamber that we're in now used to be the entrance to a Turkish bathhouse. But today, it marks the station number 3 of the Way of the Cross. Jesus falls for the first time as he enters the Center Valley Terropeon. The convicts have left the Antonia Fortress. Into the narrow alleyways they walk. The crowd is all over, mocking the convicts, enjoying their suffering. The heavy load of the cross on his shoulder, the burden of a crown of thorns on his head. He is crossing beneath the Ecce Homo arch, lifts his head and remember that a day ago, there he stood with a moment of hope for freedom that was shattered by the freedom of another person. But now, the day has come and he is walking in those streets due west towards the lower part of the Terropeon Center Valley. The day is hot, the air is tense. The weight of the cross is unbearable. Step by step, he makes his way down, not to fall. Try to keep the dignity as the crowd all around, as they're reaching this particular place in the center of the Terropeon Valley, turning down south, he will slide and fall for the first time, marking station number 3 in the Way of the Cross. We are in the Armenian Catholic Church, situated on the traditional site of station number 4 of the Way of the Cross.
This church was before land a Turkish bath. And when the first father came here, he heard that there was a church here before the 4th or 5th century. And in 1881, the second vicar discovered that it was the pavement of mosaics. And on the mosaics, the signs, the traces of the sandals of Mariam. She was waiting his son in his way of the cross. And traditionally, this is the church that remember that Jesus met his mother in his station. Every day, there are many groups come from here. Pilgrims, they pass in this church to see the 4th station and to go to other stations.
It's a Friday afternoon. The crowd has already gathered in the path of the convoy. But far away in the city, through narrow alleyways, 2 women make their way. The young one supporting her oldest. And they are making their way towards the sound of the roar of the crowd. By the sound, they can detect the location of the convicts' convoy within the path to Calvary. Into that narrow alleyway they will enter. The crowd is in front, and the young one will push herself into the crowd, separating the crowd in order to allow Mother Mary to get closer and closer to the path. The centurions have passed her by, the dust is in the air, tension is all around. The first convicts have passed by, but it wasn't him, and she's tense. She's looking to find the one she loves, the one who is walking now with a heavy load of the cross. Suddenly, through the crowd, she can detect her son, walking heavily, carrying the load of the cross, a crown of thorns into his head, and he is walking. "My son," she calls him, "my son." Her voice is carried through the sound of the crowd, and he hears his mother. He will turn. "Mother," he says, "do not worry." They touch for a brief moment as the centurions are pushing and pushing the convicts away. We are situated in the middle of the Central Valley Teropeon, known today as the Guy Street or the El Wad. Here in the crossroad with the Cross Valley lay station number 5 of the Way of the Cross, a small chapel of the Franciscan order, marking the place of Simon of Kyrene. From an elevated position, station number 3, where Jesus falls for the first time, the procession continues slowly down. He will have a brief encounter with Mother Mary. That moment fills his heart with warmth as he continues down path, the dirty road. The convicts are tired, the load is heavy. The legionnaires will force few people from the crowd to support here and there. In this particular place, in the crowd, stands a man called Simon from Kyrene, a pilgrim to Jerusalem. He will step forward to support the one convict wearing a crown of thorns on his head. And in that brief moment, when Jesus feels the pressure off him, he will lean for a second against the wall to regain his strength, as the legionnaires within time will whip and will shout when the procession continues upwards towards the western gate on Cross Valley. Simon turns around, and to his astonishment, he realizes that the place where Jesus laid his hand in order to secure his body for a moment The stone has created a marker of pain, of agony. Simon, devastated, will walk away, horrified by the moment. We are situated next to the pillar marker of station number 6 of the Way of the Cross. The convoy of prisoners are making their way from the lower level of the Center Valley Terropeon, slowly uphill through the Cross Valley. Dirt path, rubble stones, the crowd around shouting, mocking, enjoying the suffering of others. When they reach this particular point, within the crowd stands a woman called Veronica. The sight of the convicts coming through is shocking, painful. But when eventually the Galilean leader reached this point, with the heavy load of the cross on his shoulders, he looks up. She sees his face covered with dirt and sweat and pain. Her warm feelings will come over her, and she will step forward and take her veil and softly clean his face from that dirt and the dust. Looking into his eyes, warmth comes all over her from the pity. He will continue on his path towards the gate, due west, up on the hill. And as she walks back towards the crowd, she will look into a handkerchief and realize that his face has been imprinted into her veil. Station number 6 of the Way of the Cross, dedicated to Veronica.
I guess I like to think of living here on the Via Dolorosa as still a very lived experience. The event happened 2,000 years ago, but most of the places along the Via Dolorosa are owned or administered by men's congregations. And I think I would say that the stations that we remember along the way, the Veronica wiping the face of Jesus, Jesus meeting the women, Jesus meeting his mother, they're symbols for me of how, as women, we have the qualities to be able to be sensitive, to be warm, to be compassionate, to go beyond self. And I would hope that the hospitality, the way we do our education, the way we invite, treat, respect people, would be a constant reminder of those women that were part of Jesus' life.
We are now at a small chapel in one of the narrow alleyways of Jerusalem, a bustling alleyway, part of the marketplace. This particular chapel is marking station number 7 of the Way of the Cross, the traditional gates of the old city of Jerusalem facing west.
Jerusalem was, in the Roman period, was surrounded by a number of walls. The first wall we know is what is called the First Wall, a wall which is quite early. But by the time of Jesus, we already have a second wall. The second wall of the city of Jerusalem goes on a path which today runs along more or less the line of the street that runs today from the Jaffa Gate down towards the Temple Mount. But the exact line of it, where it was exactly, is something we don't totally know. What is very, very clear to us is that the second wall was in front of the Golgotha. In other words, Golgotha was outside the city wall at that time. Jewish tradition would have been challenged greatly by the idea of having crucifixion inside the city. An execution inside the city would have been too much of an attack on Jewish tradition. For that reason, Jesus would have been taken outside the city walls. Only later on do we get the building of the third wall, which is built further to the north and would have enclosed this area of the Golgotha within inside the city walls, but that is all after the crucifixion and the burial of Christ.
The convict procession are making their way uphill towards the western gate of the city. As they reach the gate, a beautiful view unveils before them. The crowd hoards around them, shouting, taunting, enjoying the suffering. Some are looking horrified at what is going on. As they come out from the gate, a shining bright light blinds their eyes. Jesus loses his grip and falls for the second time, crushing into the earth. The crowd is in a halt. Silence suddenly is around. The people are looking. Will somebody run and lay help? Will somebody come there and try to help to pick him up? But with unimaginable strength and determination, he will rise to his feet and continue his journey towards the quarry that lies ahead and their journey's end. We are situated next to the marker of station number 8 on the way of the cross, the Via Dolorosa. We're outside of the walls at a time 2,000 years ago. Jesus and the convicts have left the city. He has fallen for the second time and rose. Carrying the heavy load of the cross, he makes his way out due west on that narrow path, that dirt path. The crowd is around. Women shout towards him. He turns and says, "Do not weep for me, women, but for yourselves and for your children." He turns and continues, following that path of agony towards the quarry that lies ahead. We are situated next to station number 9 of the Way of the Cross. The marker of the station is situated next to the Coptic Orthodox Church, above the Holy Sepulchre Church. The group of convicts have left the city. They are walking slowly, burdened by the heavy load of them crosses, in a dirt path leading due west towards a far quarry. By that moment, hundreds and thousands of spectators are already gathered there on the edge of the quarry, sitting on the slopes, waiting for that moment of joy of seeing somebody else suffer and crucified. As he approaches the edge of the quarry, he stumbles on his garment and slides on loose stones and falls for the third time. The pain is unbearable, but yet he picks himself up and elevates that heavy load, that cross, and continues his path down, lower and lower, to the base of the quarry line, where the centurions and the legionnaires are awaiting. The final journey is close. We are situated in front of the most important church in the world, the Holy Sepulchre Church, the site of the crucifixion of Jesus of Nazareth. Out in the front courtyard that we are situated now is a traditional site of station number 10 of the Way of the Cross. The convicts that left the city eventually gathered down here 15 meters below us in the bottom of the quarry, as the crowd, the immense crowd, is covering the entire area, watching the spectacle. Jesus and the other convicts will be stripping of their clothing, ridiculed by the people. And one by one, they'll be taken up towards Calvary, towards Golgotha. We are in the Holy Sepulchre Church in Jerusalem, on the second floor. Behind us, station number 11 of the Way of the Cross. It is late Friday afternoon. The convicts have left the city. into the open plains. Down into the quarry they go, and the crowd is ecstatic. Thousands of people are in attendance to see the suffering of friends of others. Jesus of Nazareth and his convict friends were gathered down in the quarry. Stripping off their clothing, ridiculed by the people, they were brought here up on the top one by one. So was Jesus. They pulled him all the way up, still wearing the crown of thorns, laid him on the cross, and pound them nails into his skin as they are marking him in. The cross was then lifted up and stuck in front of everybody to see on the other side of Calvary. Station number 11 is under the patronage of the Roman Catholic Franciscan Brothers in the name of the Western world of Christianity. The altar itself is the most expensive religious artifact in Holy Land today. It was given to this place by the Medici family in Italy. Since the Church of the Holy Sepulchre has suffered fire in the year 1808, most of the mosaic around was destroyed, except one piece. Right above, we have original mosaic from the Crusader time, marking Jesus as the Emperor of the world. We are situated at station number 12 of the Way of the Cross in the Holy Sepulchre Church. We're elevated on retaining walls to the top of Calvary. Jesus was laid on the cross, nailed to the cross in station number 11, and then the cross was lifted up and stuck in top of Calvary for everybody to see. When Jesus died on that cross for the sins of others, a very unique thing happened. The earth shook, and a crack appeared, and his blood came dripping down through that crack all the way to the center of this earth to touch the skull of Adam, the first man, to forgive us humanity for the first initial sin. But then the clouds appeared and covered the entire sky, and the rain came pouring down. The crowd that a moment ago had fun, enjoying and rejoicing with the pain of others and the suffering of good, disappeared and ran home for shelter. Here in Calvary, left some few friends, some centurions, some legionnaires. The centurion will come close to check if he's dead and stick the spear between the ribs and the lungs. The Lord has passed. Station number 12 of the Way of the Cross is under the patronage of the Greek Orthodox denomination. As you can see behind me, on the upper part of the cross, you can see a little board that has got 3 lines. On top, in Greek, you have the initials INBI. Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. The B is in Greek Basileus. The second line is in Latin, INRI. For the R is king in Latin, means Rex. And beneath that, you have Hebrew initials, Yud Nun Men Yud, Yeshua Natzarti Melech Yehudim. Station number 12 marks the crucifixion and the actual spot where Jesus of Nazareth has perished from this world. "2,000 years ago, on a Friday afternoon, Jesus of Nazareth died on the cross for the sins of others. The earth shook, a crack appeared, the clouds appeared, the rain was pouring, and the crowd disappeared. Just the immediate family and some friends remained over here as Jesus is up there on the cross. In the far side of the quarry, a man called Joseph of Arimathea and a man called Nicodemus realized the importance of the moment. The Romans has lost their crowd, and they run to the Antonia fortress. Up they go to the offices of Pontius Pilatus and request for him, "Sir, release the boy. He's suffered enough." Pontius Pilate would sign the deal. Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea will return him swiftly, give the note to the centurions, and Jesus of Nazareth will be taken down from the cross and laid on this stone. He will be immediately cleaned and covered with shrouds. But because we are in a Friday afternoon and the sun is almost setting in the west, Sabbath will enter every minute. Joseph of Arimathea comes with a solution. "Mother Mary," he says, "I cannot bring your son back, but if you will allow me, I will secure his honor by giving him my tomb, who is standing not far away." Jesus of Nazareth will be taken from this stone into the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. The tomb will be sealed by the rolling stone, and as it happened, and Jesus is secured inside, the temple horn is calling, for the Sabbath has entered. Jesus is saved. Because of the fact that Jesus' body has laid on that particular stone, it had turned that stone into the only absolute second-level relic in the history of Christianity. Relic is a holy object. Jesus of Nazareth is the relic number one. But what do we have? Do we have a hair? Do we have a tooth? Do we have a bone? We don't. For the Lord has resurrected and ascended. But what do we know for sure he has touched? The stone of the dead. So anything that touches it becomes automatically a third-level relic. The stone of the dead, station number 13 of the Way of the Cross. We are standing here in the most important church in the world, known as the Holy Sepulchre Church, situated in Jerusalem on what used to be Calvary 2,000 years ago, in the bottom of a quarry. Calvary itself is the end of the Via Dolorosa, the Passion of Christ. 2,000 years ago, on a Friday afternoon, after the crucifixion, Jesus of Nazareth will die on the cross for the sins of others. Eventually, he will be taken down from the cross with the kindness of some friends, Nicodemus, Joseph of Arimathea, and Pontius Pilate. He will be eventually taken to the stone of the dead, the anointing stone. He will be cleaned, washed, covered with shrouds. But since there was no time to take him to the Mount of Olives for burial, he will be brought here to the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. The rolling stone will be opened, and the body will be laid in the tomb. When the stone will be turned back to its original position, they will hear the temple horn calling, for the Sabbath has entered. Jesus was saved. After 3 days, they reopen the rolling stone and realize that Jesus is not there. The tomb is empty, for the Lord has resurrected and ascended to the heavens to become the supreme power. The cave itself has changed. The facade has changed. Different hats were put on top, but not the stone inside. Station number 14 of the Way of the Cross is the most important of the stations. And the importance of this particular tomb is that it had been found empty, for the Lord has resurrected. If you believe in that, you are a believer. Station number 14, the end of the Via Dolorosa, the road of agony and the passion of Christ. Here in the Holy Sepulchre Church, the most important church in the entire wide world.
I came from Greece, but I born here. I finished the high school in the seminary of Mount Zion. And then from '86 until now, I served here in the Holy Sepulchre 21 years. First of all, I'm responsible for rights to live for the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate in the Holy Sepulchre. Then to protect also our service, to be in time to live by our fathers, to show the rights from the Franciscan, Armenian, inside the Holy Sepulchre, also Coptic and Syrian. Everybody he has here rules to protect, and also to protect our treasures in the Holy Sepulchre that we have a lot of. One of the most exclusive places inside the Holy Sepulchre is the Catholicon that we are staying now. It's an exclusive place to live. Nobody can enter inside to pray, just for the Orthodox people to live, that we have a service. And then also the Golgotha, the place where the Christ crucified. Also it's unique. And also the tomb of Christ, we built it by the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate 1810, but now we're also with the sharing with other communions, Franciscans and Armenians.
את המפתחות של כניסת הקבר אנחנו קיבלנו על ידי סלאח א-דין איובי, אשר שחרר את ירושלים בשנת 1187. התפקיד שלנו היה לשמור על הכנסייה, ומאז עד היום ואנחנו בתפקיד הזה. בכנסייה יש שתי תפקידים, כל תפקיד בנפרד. זה תפקיד של מחזיק מפתחות כניסת הקבר, שזה משפחת ג'ודה, זה המשפחה שלי. והתפקיד השני זה פתיחת סגירת השער, שהיא בידי משפחת נוסייבה. היומיומי זה העדות, שהם האורתודוקסים, הארמנים והפרנסיסקנים. אלה הם קובעים מתי זה נפתח, מתי זה נסגר. בפסחא, יום חמישי זה לפרנסיסקנים, ביום שישי זה לאורתודוקסים, בשבת זה לארמנים. המפתח נשאר 24 שעות בידי משפחת ג'ודה. המפתח יוצא בבוקר, נותנים את זה למשפחת נוסייבה, פותחים, מחזירים לנו את המפתח. ואני שומר על מפתח. זה תפקיד כבוד. וזה נותן כבוד, כמו שנתן כבוד לדור הישן, זה גם נותן כבוד לדור החדש.
Jerusalem.com takes you deep beneath the city. To the western wall tunnels of the Temple Mount. Available now at Jerusalem.com.
Welcome to the Western Wall Tunnels. My name is Yehuda. I'll be your tour guide today. Before we enter the tunnels, let's briefly walk through the history of Jerusalem. In front of us, there is a model of a mountain. This mountain is a very famous one. It's called Mount Moriah. In reality, this mountain is right here behind me. The reason you don't see this mountain today is because there was a big structure built upon it called the Temple Mount. According to Jewish tradition, right over here, the peak of the mountain is called the foundation stone. It's the spiritual center of the earth. Our story starts 3,000 years ago with King David, who establishes a capital here in Jerusalem. The story continues with his son, King Solomon, who builds the first temple. And after that, the second temple will be built. Our story starts in the tunnels 2,000 years ago. Towards the end of the Second Temple era, a very famous king comes into power here in Jerusalem. His name is King Herod, and he wants to appear as a kind king. He wants the Jewish people to like him. So he decides to glorify the temple. He does it by digging out this hill in the north and filling in the lower parts of the mountain with arches, and above that, a huge platform, which we know today as the Temple Mount. Right over here is the foundation stone, which above that, King Herod renovates the second temple and builds the most glorious temple ever seen. Sadly, in the year 70, a Roman general named Titus comes to Jerusalem, conquers the city, and on the 9th of the Jewish month Av, destroys the second temple. 1,400 years ago, the Muslims built the structure we all know today in the middle of the Temple Mount, the Golden Dome, the Dome of the Rock. 700 years ago, in Jerusalem time, practically yesterday, the Mamluks come to Jerusalem. Mamluks, who are devoted Muslims, decide they want the entire citizen population should have easy access into the Temple Mount. They do not want to climb from the valley where they lived up to the Al-Aqsa Mosque and back down 5 times a day like a yo-yo. What do? In the same technique Herod used, they fill in the entire valley with arches leaning against the western wall. Arches, above arches, above arches, and above these arches, they built their houses. They create what we know today as the Muslim quarter in the old city. As you could see, the Muslim quarter today conceals most of the western wall, leaving us only a small portion exposed, the western wall people know today. We've entered the tunnels. We've walked under the Muslim quarter. And now, we're back at the hidden parts of the Western Wall. Looking at the Western Wall, we notice different kinds of construction. These are 2 different periods in the Western Wall. Above us, these upper parts are Muslim renovation from 1400 years ago. But from here, all the way until the actual bedrock of the valley, this is Jewish construction from 2,000 years ago. Notice at this beautiful frame. These stones are aligned one near each other and one on top of the other, perfectly, symmetrically, with no cement in between to glue the stones together. This is what we call dry construction, kind of like Lego. And here, the largest stone found in the Temple Mount. Its length is 45 feet long. That is longer than a bus. Its height, 12 feet high, and its depth inside, 14 feet. Almost 600 tons. That is equivalent to almost 200 elephants. And in a modern scale, 2 747 jumbo jets with the people and the luggage after shopping in Israel. That's heavy. And the big question is, how? How did someone carve a stone like this? How did they roll it here? How did they lift it so high up? And how did they place it so neatly? Archaeologists, mathematicians, physicists today do not know how, with the lack of technology, they were able to move something so big. Call it mystery. In the year 70, when Titus destroys the temple, his soldiers are standing above our heads and pushing stones down from the western wall, stone after stone, row after row, till they get to the biggest stone. They start carving into the stone. Notice you could see the bottom frame of the stone, but where's the upper frame? It's gone. It was destroyed by the Romans. Luckily for us, instead of them breaking the stone, eventually the stone broke them, leaving us a beautiful 2,000-year-old testimony. As you could see, we're looking at a gate. The entrance, one of 4, in the Western Wall to the Temple Mount. And through this gate, Jews would enter the Temple Mount through a very wide corridor beneath the floor of the Temple Mount. This corridor continues on inside 90 feet, which at the end of it, there are stairs going up to the floor of the Temple Mount. 1,400 years ago, when the Muslims come to Jerusalem, they allow the Jewish community to establish here, in this gate, a synagogue. Jews will be praying here for hundreds of years, up to 900 years ago, when the Crusaders come to Jerusalem and banish the Jews. They expel them, and they decide to block the entrance of this gate. But please notice, the Crusaders only blocked the gate halfway. The upper part looks like a more modern blockage. So who blocked it? Well, here comes the story. 45 years ago, Israel conducts one of its most famous wars, the Six-Day War. The Israeli Defense Force liberates Jerusalem and unifies the city. Archaeologists start coming here right away. When they get to this point where we're standing, they discover that the upper half of this gate is opened, exposed. Rabbi Getz, may he rest in peace, who was the rabbi of the Western Wall at the time, decides to go inside, into the Temple Mount, and he starts digging in the mountain itself because he believes that the vessels of the temple are buried somewhere here. He has one small problem: the Waqf, the Jordanian Arab Authority that has control over the Temple Mount, given by the state of Israel, hear him dig. And they go down. And the end of the story is that Rabbi Getz has to come out, and because of international pressure, this gate over here is blocked completely. Since then, till today, this is status quo. Nobody digs beneath the Temple Mount. We're standing now in the closest place a Jewish person could get to the Holy of Holies while walking along the Western Wall. In a straight line, perpendicular to where we're standing, at a distance of 300 feet, is the foundation stone, is the peak of the mountain where the Holy of Holies is. Did you enjoy your walk along the Western Wall? I hope you did. It's a good time to rest. We're sitting now in the main marketplace of Jerusalem 2,000 years ago. These are original, authentic tiles. The archaeologists don't fix anything. They don't renovate. They basically clean the dirt. This marketplace, which maybe Jesus himself walked upon. Personally, I like calling it the original Wall Street. As you can see behind me, the masons began carving the bedrock. Their plan was to continue the street, but for some reason they stopped. In the year 66, a great revolt breaks out. The Jews uprise against the Romans. The masons stop working. Time freezes here. This tile that was carved but was never placed on the street itself is still smooth. Nice, smooth limestone. The street below us is tarnished, even a little bit ruined. You could imagine people walking by, wagons, horses, merchant placing down their merchandise. After 2,000 years of silence, this street wakes back up to life.
Jerusalem.com takes you deep beneath the city. To the Western Wall tunnels of the Temple Mount. Available now at Jerusalem.com.